people are not equal and excellence should be embraced. What does that mean? Is it just big words? Or is there an actual practical use for that idea? What to do with it? Well, now I'm going to be talking about schools. And schools are an environment where the society's values and such are represented in, because the school is the instrument that the society uses to educate the next generation of people. So that means that all the values of the society and all the ways of doing things, everything that makes up the society is basically represented in the school in a way, because that's what the society wants to educate the next generation. It doesn't necessarily have to be children, even adults go to school, but the students. So schools are an important part of society. In fact, one of the most important things when it comes to these sorts of institutions and such that society has. And I say that school systems as they exist in the modern West are awful. They are totally, utterly useless and just bad in every way. And specifically because I'm going to be talking about the equality and excellence. That's what is going to be the main focus of this speech. So let's get right into it then. So I'm just gonna get into the specifics that I would implement if I was to redo some school systems, or reform some school systems. Well, first of all, I would be in favor of segregation of schools, like classes, and this segregation has nothing to do with any racial stuff or anything like that. That's nonsense. That's irrelevant entirely. What I'm talking about is segregating the classes based on the students' abilities and all that stuff. So like better students would be in one class and worse students on other classes, basically, is the idea. And then of course each different subject in the school would have their own different classes, where like one person could be very good at some subject and bad at another subject, so they would be on different classes, like on that scale of advance, perhaps. So this would mean that people who are not that good at some of the subjects would be on the worse classes, or the classes for the worse, whatever. And then people who are good at it would be on the classes for the people who are better at that stuff. So why something like this? Well, I think the reason should be obvious. The way people are put to school, well, especially like children, because children are the ones who primarily go to school first. Even if some adults are still going to universities or whatever, it starts at childhood. So you could have on the same class the most stupidest person who has ever walked this earth, and then the most brilliant prodigy to have ever walked this earth. You could have them sitting side by side on the same class next to each other. And I think that's ridiculous. And all because they were just born in the same year. And why are we putting, as a society, children in classrooms based on the year they were born in? You could say that, well, there might be some correlation to some extent that, like, children of some age tend to be somewhat similar, but, like, no. Like, there can be vast differences, and like I also already mentioned, different classes, different subjects would have different, a person could go on different levels of advance for different subjects. So, like, different people are better at some things than others. And that's one of the first instances I was mentioning, the fact that people are not equal. You should go listen to the earlier speech I made about how people are not equal and excellence should be embraced. Because that's basically like the prequel to this speech. So, people are not equal. some people seem to be genuinely under the sort of impression, or at least on some level have this idea, perhaps it's like some like faith into, they put some faith into some idea, there's some societal consensus that like this equality stuff, like I talked about in that earlier speech, where like this equality is held as this high value, and like some people might genuinely think that like people might be of the same intellect or something like that, where even if they don't necessarily like really think that way, perhaps like somewhere in the back of their head they have this idea, or perhaps it's like some sort of wishful thinking, or whatever. It could take any form, but whatever form it takes, the result in the world is that people for some reason seem to think that people are equal to the extent that you should put them all in the same class just based on the arbitrary year they were born in. So this results in the fact that some really brilliant, intelligent kid could be on the same class as the most stupid one ever. So that's just stupid. That is inefficient at teaching the children. So that's just wrong then, because you're holding back the brilliant kid who could be advancing way quicker and could be learning more. You're holding him back, or her, whatever. The gender is irrelevant. You are holding that kid back, and then that stupid kid will be struggling really bad because the environment just isn't for him, because there's this imagined concept of the equality, the not as a value, the equal person, the standard, the average. Yes, the average is the word I was looking for. This imagined idea of the average person that like this system is designed for, like there's this ultimate concept of the optimal average that's like it's all designed around, but people don't fit into that average. That average is the manifestation of this equality. It is the personification of this value of equality. There is this ideal of this ideal average person that does not exist, because people are not equal. Even if by pure coincidence someone happened to be perfectly average at everything, well, that would just be that one person. Everyone else wouldn't be. It's just extremely unlikely. So, people are better at other things, better at some things and worse at others. And that's just inevitable, because people are not equal. They are not equal in any level. And again, refer to the earlier speech. I also want to specify it here too, that like, when I say that people are not equal on any level, they might still have some equalities, like, for example, equality before the law. The same law should apply to everyone. So I'm just gonna mention it here for the sake of mentioning it, but I'm not gonna talk about that any further. I'm gonna be specifically talking about education and all that stuff. So yeah, refer to the earlier speech. I'm assuming you have already heard it by now. So, the students are not equal. They are not equal at all in any way. Some students might just be better at every area. They might just have some intelligence, some inherent trait in their person that just makes them better at everything. For example, that's one possibility. There could be someone who's just bad at everything. There could be some who are good at some things and bad at others. And the specific things that they are good at are different from other students that are good at some things and bad at others. So there's all this variety. Very diverse ecosystem. So this conception of the average person that the system is designed for is very faulty. It does not work at all. So that's why the segregation of classes, I believe, is a good idea. Because then the people who are actually good at something, they can be put on the classes where they won't be held back by the students who are worse. They would be getting more advanced education, and then those stupid people, or not necessarily inherently stupid, or some people might be inherently stupid, like there could be a person who is always on the worst class, because they're just inherently stupid person, who is just stupid at everything. But there could be some who are on advanced classes on some subjects, and then on not advanced classes on other subjects. 4 other subjects. So yeah, it's varying. Each subject has the system of different levels of advancity. However is that word supposed to be said? Advancedness. Whatever. Enough semantics. There are, of course, going to be inevitably people who are different. Because people really are different. And now I'm gonna get to the part where I talk about embracing excellence. You see, the way to implement that in practice and how it is relevant to schools is, you see, it is this idea that people are good at some things and bad at other things. So I say, instead of schools making the students focus all of their time and effort at improving their skills on some subjects they are struggling with, to try to raise those lower parts of their abilities to some standard, to reach some average level of performance overall, instead of doing that, instead of focusing on the bad where they struggle, how about you instead focus all of the time and effort, make the students focus all of their time and effort on the subjects they actually are good at. And this is the way to reach excellence, and this is what I believe should be done, where the way the current school system would work is, if a student is really bad at a subject, is basically like failing that subject or something, then that will just bring harm their way. Everything will go wrong. They might have to redo the year in school or whatever because they were bad at something. But people are bad at some things. So why should that be held against them? If there is a person who has no ability at something, then they just don't have any ability with that. Why bother with it? Move on. Life goes on. Why do you have to care about some area that is not their strength? I say, instead, what should be done is the students should play into their strengths. So the areas that they are actually good at, those are the ones that should be focused on. In fact, I think that the school system as a whole should make an assessment of the students. Like, they should be taken to a test of some kind where their abilities are measured in some way to see the areas that they are good at and areas that they are bad at. And then they should be then focusing on the ones that they are good at. So perhaps the school should just drop subjects for some students that they are bad at, and then just focus extra time and effort that would be otherwise spent on those subjects that the student is bad at. That time would then be spent on the subjects that they are good at. And this is the way to reach the excellence, because now you are playing into your strengths, you are improving your skill on something you have a natural talent for. If you have some inherent trait that would be like in the brain, biologically, genes, whatever, you'd have some inherent biological trait to be better at some things. Well, those are the things you should be focusing on. That's the way you reach excellence, because that's the way you actually get better at something, when you have this natural ability to do something. And then you practice and train that thing. Then you get better, because you are better at studying that thing, you are better at learning it, and you will perform better with that. But instead, if you waste all of your time and effort struggling with the things that you're bad at, well, you're never going to be good at that. For the most part. But like, the idea is that even if you could raise that bottom part of your set of skills, even if you can do that, even if you could raise that up and reach some imagined average, it's still a waste of time, because you could have spent that time improving your abilities where it actually matters. Because that's what I want to get across here. people don't need to be equal in the end. People don't need to reach some average where every skill and trait they have is average, and then like the way people seem to think of school is that like everyone out there in the world should be brought up to some standard. There is some set line that is a standard that covers all the skills and things that a person may have, and everyone should be brought up to that standard. That's what school exists for, apparently. That's how people think that a school should be, but that's not at all what I think school should be for. What I think school should be for is to see that there are people and then recognize the fact that they have strengths and weaknesses, and they should amplify those strengths, make them even better at that. So this means that the result from this school system, the students that come out of this system, will be highly diverse and very unequal in their skills and abilities when it comes to things that have been studied. Their academic performance, or whatever you want to call it, knowledge and all that stuff. They wouldn't be some great number of people, some masses who have reached some arbitrary level, some arbitrary standard. They would be people who have played into their strengths, and there would be people who are very good at some things and bad at others. And I see that's a better world than the one where everyone is wasting their time improving the areas where they are bad at. Because then now you actually have people who are good at something. You don't just have people who are average at everything, you have people who are actually good at some things. Because a student who is good at a subject, well, they're just good. They've already reached the level, the standard, with no effort. And then they are never gonna get past that. They are gonna get stuck there because the school doesn't teach them anymore. There's the set level of standard, the standard set level that students need to reach, and then they pass the school and get out of the school. But a person who's already really good, they're just gonna already be at that level. They're just gonna reach that level. They can already just take the tests without studying for the tests at all, and they can just do all that stuff and whatever. Like they're just already gonna reach that with no effort at all, because they're just naturally good at that. But that's all they will ever be. And then when they come out of the school, they are at the same point where they started. They didn't actually improve anything. That skill that they are so good at, there is this ability, this natural talent that a person has for some area, and they are in the same place where they started by the end of the school, because the school didn't teach them anything. Because instead the school made them focus on the areas that they were bad at. If there was another subject that this person was really bad at, that's where the student spent all of their time studying this thing that they are bad at. So they did lift that ability up, but this area where they had this natural talent is now wasted potential. They could have excelled at this area really well, but no, they didn't, because the school didn't teach them. Because this person had already reached the level by default. So this arbitrary imagined conception of the average person is very bad. And it is just a misunderstanding of what a school should be for. The school should be for embracing the people's actual abilities, to embrace the excellence, amplify their strengths. That's what school should be for. That's the primary purpose, the focus of a school. You see, this system where people are brought to this average, it was designed for some early industrial revolution times factory workers. That's what it was designed for. And that's not some secret or some conspiracy theory. That's what those people behind this Western modern school system said. That's what they said. It is specifically for this purpose. These factory workers, they would go to the factory and do their factory work. Like, this is what the school system was designed for. Because people who are average at everything, people who are just average, they will be more interchangeable. They are basically just mindless drones who are all average. And that's why the lower skills are brought up, because now they are all average. And then the natural talents that they have are not amplified, because that would make them not average. So there are multiple reasons for this sort of average, this want for everything being average. There's the industrial society that wants every person to be an interchangeable cog in the machine, and people are not interchangeable cogs when they are very good at some things and just bad at others. That's not equal. Like, that's not in that case, people are not equal in their abilities, where some of their strengths have been amplified. What industrial society wants is that everyone is equally equal in that sense. Like, they want mindless drones coming out of the factory that is school also. So like that is what this system was designed for, and I say that's really bad, and that is definitely not what we should have. No, I'm not that much of a historian, so I can't really argue for the benefits and the advantages and disadvantages of that system at that time. It may or may not have been useful back then. I don't know. I'm not a historian, so I can't really comment on whether that sort of a school system was the right way to do things back then, in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. It may have been useful, who knows? Maybe it was, I don't know. I'm not gonna comment on that. But even if that is the case, we are not in those times anymore, so the school should not reflect those sorts of values or whatever. But unfortunately, because of this culture of equality and all this stuff like I talked about and in the earlier speech, and what is just obvious in the world, people hold equality as a very high value for whatever reason. Well, because of that, and this school system that was designed to make interchangeable cogs, well, people recognize that trait in the school, whether consciously or not, and then decide to just keep that system the way it is, because it is compatible with their wider worldview of equality. So, like, then this system remains. The system remains even if the Industrial Revolution has already progressed to further later levels of development. Even if we are not in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, where everyone just works in the factory line. Even if we are not there anymore, because the school system embraces this idea of equality. And like there is this imagined person, the imagined average person that like everyone should be, and that's what comes out of the system. Ideally, that's why it's designed. Now, whether or not the school actually does produce people who are exactly average and equal, well, who knows, but like that's at least the design philosophy of the school. That's what they are meant to do. And to a large extent, they are pretty good at that, I would say, because, well, you know, the person who is good at something, well, they will just be that good at that thing, like I explained. And then the areas that they struggle with, well, they do focus their effort at that area. So in that sense, they do come out as equals in that sense. So that's actually really unfortunate. So I would say that, well, that's kind of why this species even exists. Well, that's kind of why this speech even exists, because I think the school is successful at what it's doing. It does make people into equals, at least to some extent. You know, of course, there will always be outliers and people who are just different, because people can be different from each other at different levels too. Not everyone is equally different from others. So, like, what you have to understand is that people, they are diverse in, like, just every sense of the word in their abilities. There can be lots of people who are very similar, but there can be also people who are different, and they can be different from others at different levels. Someone can be more different from others than other people are different from each other. It comes in all forms, all kinds of varieties. Like, you can basically have a list of these traits that a person can have, their abilities, and you just give them a random distribution of values where they have just random abilities and all that stuff. But it's not just pure random. There could be some weight or like some distribution, like, let's see, what was it called again? The distribution thing, the big bunch, the curve thing. What on earth was that called again? Who knows? Anyway, there could be a stronger bias towards the traits being around some equality. Like there could be some many people are very similar. So it's not pure randomness where everyone just has a purely random ability. Of course, higher levels of advanced, like some prodigy who is really good at some things, is more rare than someone who is just generally good at some things and bad at others. So like the further the ability goes from the average, the less likely it gets. So that's the kind of distribution that it would have. But anything is possible. Perhaps. But I'm not exactly sure what specifically that system would look like. But those are just abstractions. Well, actually, they are quite important still because you have to take into consideration all the systems. But anyway, whether the scale is exactly whatever it is exactly, well, that will just be dealt with. The systems will be adjusted and normalized on the students that come into the school, of course. So yeah, that problem will just be solved by the schools themselves. They will take care of that. So I don't need to specify that in this speech. What is the exact proportion of how many students are good at some things and bad at other things? There could be some localizations where some students are just really bad at other things, like in general. So and also that might depend on many things. Yeah, I don't think I need to get into the specifics too much. If I was to implement this kind of a school system, the school systems themselves would take care of... No, the individual schools themselves would take care of this. They would take care of seeing that what students go to which classes. So it might happen that in some school there might be this advanced tier of some subject and no one goes there because everyone is too bad at it. And then the school will just take care of that. They will just dismiss that class from the school system for that year of students. So yeah, that they will just deal with that then. So yeah, I don't need to specify that here because they will just take care of that themselves. And also there could be a school. Maybe it might also depend on geographical location. Maybe in some area in the world people are stupid, more stupid than others. And in that area, the schools in that local area will have to adjust their tiers. I'll just call them tiers. The different classes where people go based on their ability. They could have different... I'm just going to call them tiers. So different tiers. They could adjust those like arbitrarily. They could be completely arbitrary. Where they could be like... Some school could have... So like, also there could be a different number of tiers. And it doesn't have to be uniform around the world. Like, or even in a single country, or like every school could have their own way of doing things where, well, even if they follow the same exact specification, the same standard, the specific ones that are chosen, which tiers exist, would be different. There could be some schools where there is, well, let's say that we pick the subject math, that is then just math, and there are different tiers of math. Let's say that they could go from 1 to 6. There are 6 tiers of math. 6 tiers. So like, of course, well, it doesn't really matter, but okay, let's say that tier 1 is the worst people, and then tier 6 is the best people at math. So there is these different tiers. It could be that in some school, there are 6 tiers, there are 6 different classes concurrently running, there are 6 different teachers, 6 different classes, and 6 sets of people for those classes. So all those 6 different tiers are being utilized in that school at once. then there could be a school that is missing class number 5, tier number 5, because no one just went there. There could be some that only have the higher 3, so 4, 5, 6. That was more difficult than it should have been. Let's see. So the classes 4, 5, and 6 would be in some school, and then there could be another school that has the classes 1, 2, 3. And all that stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. The schools would just take care of that themselves. They would make the assessments and adjustments and all that stuff. They would do all that stuff. So the classes, I don't need to specify the exact distribution of people. Anyway, enough of that tangent. Yeah, so what was I talking about again earlier? Let's see, there was the industrial society. There was the average. I might need to pause the recording and go back to see what I was talking about. So yeah, I was talking about how it's unfortunate that the culture of equality makes the system that produces equal students in the end remain. That is very unfortunate, and I believe there needs to be a massive paradigm shift in the Western society where equality as a value is dropped entirely. But again, I repeat this for the second time for this speech, that people can still have equality before the law and all that stuff. So that's all good. The same law should apply to everyone. So that's still good. So equality itself is a really big concept. Of course, there are equalities that are good, but there are equalities that are not good. And people being equal, like inherently, like in their skills and traits and abilities and all that stuff, that is nonsense. And that just needs to be left behind, where that should not be a thing. People's rights and like them as persons, they can be respected equally in the sense that like laws and all that applies to everyone, and like they shouldn't be mistreated or anything. So I'm not for that sort of thing. What this is all about, like even the fact that I feel compelled to talk about that sort of thing just demonstrates how far it goes, that the cultural consensus is that equality, universal equality on everything is just inherently good. The fact that I even feel the need to talk about it, that I don't mean that people should have no equality or like there's no equality is good, that just shows how deep it goes. That even I, who I'm talking about this against it, still need to reference it like that, because yeah, it really is deep rooted and it's really bad. It needs to be taken out entirely. It's really bad. But anyway, as I was saying, Western civilization actually is what I should be saying, not society. Civilization. Western civilization has some values and all that stuff. They apparently come from Christianity, so Christianity teaches that like people are equal or whatever. I'm not that much of a religious person or whatever, studied all the religions, so I don't really care about that stuff. And I'm not too much of a historian either. I mean, I'm not a historian at all. Anyway, and I'm not really religious at all either. Enough nonsense semantics. I seem to get too caught up on them. Whatever. Yeah, so Western civilization and equality. Ay. What we need is to get rid of this equality nonsense and go for this inequality thing. People should be equal from birth in the sense that they all have equality, like they all have equal opportunities. They are equal before the law. They all have all the equal like chances. They all get to go to school. So in that sense, people will be equal, and that's the kind of equality that I think should be good, is good and should be promoted. Where the kind of equality that would be the kind of inequality that would be bad is where some people don't get to go to school because they have just been they've been given some arbitrary title that says that they don't get to go to school. That's bad. That's the wrong kind of non-equality. You see, it would be a misconception to think that equality either comes in the universalist form it does in the modern Western civilization, or just no equality whatsoever. That's a misconception. equality can be implemented in many ways because equality itself is a very big concept. It comes in many forms and can be applied and implemented in various ways. So yeah, it's not either equality or no equality. That's a misconception. So yeah, I think that's a big thing to explain and get out of the way. Equality comes in many forms. There are many equalities that are really good and I am in favor of, and a society would be very miserable without. So yeah, things like just birthrights and things that come from birth, some arbitrary titles really are bad. Like, I'm not in favor of any sort of aristocracies. They are just bad. Nobilities or royalty or anything like that, they are all bad. Anything where there is some arbitrary title, a title that does not actually measure the person's achievements and such in life, that is just given to them by birth, those are really bad and they should be all eradicated entirely. Any title or anything that a person has should be achieved by them in their life as a person, personal achievement and all that stuff. Yeah. So there are equalities that are good. Everyone should get to go to school equally, and it shouldn't have to cost money or whatever, so that only the rich can go to school and not the poor. That's bad. So that kind of equality is good, where everyone gets to go to school. Everyone is equal in their rights, and like rights to things like freedom and all that stuff. So yeah, there are kinds of equalities that are good. Some equalities are just not actually real at all, because you see, the kinds of equalities that I talk about that should be dropped as a value are things that are, it would be an illusion to think that people are equal in those ways at all. Like the fact that people would be of equal intellect. Any kind of person who is not blinded by some ideology, or who isn't just stupid themselves, or both, can see that people are not of equal intelligence. That's just not a thing. You go around in the world, people are not equal. Like, it's obvious, it's blatantly obvious. But the fact that systems and value systems and all kinds of things like that pretend as if people are equal, that's just a massive problem, because now there is this massive disconnect between reality and then the way people perceive and try to manage reality. Or society in society that exists in reality. So if you try to manage society in a way that does not reflect the reality, well, then you're just going to mess up everything, because, well, that's just the way it works. There is a society. No, there's reality in which certain systems work and certain systems do not. You need to recognize the systems that do work and play into them in the correct way. So when there is a disconnect between the reality and your conception of the reality, that's what creates bad results. And that's where the value of equality doesn't work, when you imagine that people are equal in everything. No, they are not. So, yeah, right. School systems. They should implement all kinds of things like that. But I'm also going to keep talking about other things now too, as well. So yeah, let's talk about also some other things. I'm not so sure if these are necessarily too related to the concept of inequality or whatever and excellence and all that stuff, but I think they actually might be. Or actually, no. No, they are, yes. Yeah, so, yeah. I'm gonna be talking about at least one thing. Let's see, so... The school systems as they exist, or rather, no. Let's start this way. I think schools should be more personal, and teachers should be more personally involved with the students. And personal evaluations by the teacher should be given more, or like rather the teacher should be given more control when it comes to evaluating the students. The way the modern school system works is there is this impersonal bureaucratic process for evaluating the students and all that stuff, where like the students take the same tests universally everywhere around the country. Now schools are discrete in different countries, and also some countries might have more school systems, like individual different schools like private schools or whatever. But anyway, let's just focus on a country level. In the same country, there might be just a one single school. Of course, this depends on the country too. So yeah, anyway. But anyway, let's just focus on, let's say that there is a school. Okay, well, school on a school level, a school system. Nah. Okay, let's say there's a country and there's a single school, a public school in that country. Okay, so in that country, everyone in there, they take the same tests everywhere. They take the same things. Every test is the same. The textbooks are the same, at least more or less. They teach the same subjects equally in the same way. Everything is standardized. And that is nonsense. That is nonsense. Where, like, I just think that is all bad. Perhaps the imagined intended use case with this standardization is that perhaps like no one would be left behind, where like this way there won't be schools that are just bad at everything, or just bad schools. Because if everyone is standardized, then everyone is equally good. But again, I believe that the same thing that applies to humans, or happens with humans, when you treat everyone equally, or like want to achieve equality, I mean. If you want to achieve equality with humans, you inevitably end up bringing down the great to achieve equality, because you can't lift up the bad. So the only way to achieve equality is to bring down the great. So everyone will be equal in their misery. And I believe the same thing happens with school systems also. That is, if you even can get there. Lots of times when you might try to achieve equality, you might not even succeed at it. You might only bring down the grade to some extent, but not all the way to the very bottom. So you might not even succeed at bringing down the grade. But that's at least the intended thing. Or unintended, depending on whether you are even consciously aware of what you are doing. It's a very complicated system, but anyway, in the school systems, I believe the same thing happens, where some schools might just be better schools than other schools. So why bother trying to standardize them? Why? What? So some school wouldn't be too bad? Well, how does a standard not make them bad? Or make them not bad? So just imagine this, there are different discrete schools in a country. Some schools are better than others. And if your intention is that if you apply some universal standard, that way somehow the bad schools would just magically lift themselves up. No. Why would that happen? The only way that could happen is if that standard itself just somehow promotes good things, good traits, somehow just makes the school be better. Unless those standards themselves somehow promote good things in the school, well, that's just not going to happen. You're not going to bring up that school. That doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't even make any sense. Like, on what level does it even make any sense? If there's some school that is just better, then it's just better. Well, that's nonsense. To try to fix that situation as if there's anything wrong to begin with. So what if some schools are bad? Sucks to be in this world. Well, that's just the way the universe works, like, whatever. Okay, some schools are bad. Some students go to some bad school. Tough shit. That's how the world works. But like, okay, so that's not nonsense. But perhaps it's not on a school level. Maybe they imagine that... so that's the school level. But what about the student level? Perhaps they imagine that every student deserves some equality again, in that everyone should be given some equal... everyone should be given the same, like, kind of school exams, because they're just equal and they deserve equality, and therefore they deserve equal exams. But like, why? I mean, yeah, genuinely, just why? I don't think that's the purpose of school. I don't think the purpose of school is to grade students. That's not the point. The point is to educate the people. The purpose isn't to evaluate them and give them grades. The purpose is to educate them. So why? Why should they be given the exact same the same exams? Why? Why the same textbooks? Why? What? Because people are equal and they should be... They know they are not. Different people are good at other things and bad at other things. But okay, perhaps just some geographical or whatever things just make some schools bad or whatever. But like I already addressed that. So be it. If some schools are bad, then they're just bad. Whatever. But that's no reason to bring down the great schools. If some school is really good for some reason, but then that school is just good, let it be. If some school is bad, well, focus on that school specifically. If some school is doing really badly, well, just go after that school somehow. Go there, send some people there, and go see what's wrong with that school and try to fire some people who are really bad. So like, yeah, if there's a school that's like genuinely just doing harm to the people or whatever, well, yeah, go after the school and demolish it. Rebuild a new school somewhere else and hire new people. You like deal with those problems as they appear. Like on that level, that's what you do. You go there and fix it if there's something like genuinely wrong. Like if there's something like genuinely happening, like there's some school that has problems, well, you go there and fix the problems. You don't need to apply some universal standard specification that every school has to adhere to reach some utopian equality. Like nonsense. Like that is just nonsense. Like what kind of delusion? Like that is so stupid. That is so stupid. That is so stupid. I find it somewhat amusing even. It is so stupid. Like what world are you operating under? Like what kind of worldview are you operating under to reach that kind of conclusion? Like it is so silly. Like it's just silly. That's the word for it. It's just silly. Anyway, that's nonsense. Like no. The purpose of school is to educate the people. Grading is nonsense. It doesn't matter. Like at least like the final, very like final, like as the students leave the school and they are given some final exam numbers or whatever. Like that, no. That's not what school exists for. What the purpose of school is to educate them. So therefore, it might not even be a thing that some schools are better than others, but even if it is, let it be. And if there are some problem cases, some schools that are just bad for whatever reason, you just go after them and you fix them. So that issue is dealt with like that. No need for some universal specific standard, some standard specification, no need for any of that. No need for the same exams everywhere. So that school level is a non-issue. So it really comes down to this belief that people universally in the entire country are just equal and they deserve the equal grades, or grading systems. But like I said, that's not the point. So what is the point? There's education. The students should be educated. They should be taught. So what if, the schools, no. So what if some schools are somewhat better than other schools, perhaps? What if some teachers are better than others? Some teachers who just, if you give them teachers more individual control and to get more personally involved with the students, well, some teachers might be bad. Well, so be it. Tough shit again. Life is hard or whatever. There are inevitably going to be bad things happening, but you are trading one system for another. Well, let's look at the alternative then. What about the current implementation then? Are you suggesting that this current implementation, with all of these problems that I've described so far in this speech, is that then a better alternative? So what if the system I'm proposing has a few small inconveniences or problems? Well, fine, so does the current system. But I say my proposal is way better, overall. Just way better, in every way. No, I mean, not in every way, but my proposal is way better than the current school system implementation. As I've now discussed in this speech, all these problems I believe are very important that I've discussed. And I don't think the personal involvement of the students, the teachers increased. I don't think the personal involvement of the teacher in the evaluation of the students is that much of a problem to begin with. But because first of all, just hire good teachers, and have and promote a culture of actually educating the people. really well. Hire good teachers, educate good teachers, train good teachers. So maybe there will be some teacher that mistreats some students because the teacher doesn't like the students, and if the teacher has more control over the students in some personal relationship, well, sucks to be them, I guess. No, tough shit, that's the world. But I say overall the system is better. And even then, like, yeah, whatever shit happens, but like, it doesn't, like, that's like the worst case scenario where, like, I don't think that's the, I don't see that as like the, what would be like the, I don't think that represents most cases. Like, that's the kind of edge, no, not an edge case, that's more the kind of like an outlier, like the worst case scenario, right? Like, where some, like, if you look at that and you like try to debunk my proposal for fixing school systems, that like, oh, but the teacher would have too much personal control over the students and that would allow them to mistreat the students, but like that's a worst case scenario. And even if that happens to like some, to lesser extent, like so be it, whatever. You know, like I said, like I have now said a couple times, and I do need to get this, and I do need to focus on this more later. The purpose of school is not to evaluate and to grade the students to begin with. That's not the point. The point is to teach them. If a teacher is bad at teaching, well, then they are just bad at teaching, and then they are just failing at their purpose. They are just not serving their role properly. But that can just as well happen with the current system. If a teacher is bad, then the teacher is just bad, and they are just failing at that. So if the teacher somehow fails to treat the students properly, well, I don't see how it's the fault of my proposal. If I was to be given some sort of dictatorial power to reform school systems, I don't see it being my fault if some teacher is really bad. If some teacher is bad, then they're just bad. Yeah, get rid of those teachers then. You know, the students would still have the power to complain to the school that their teacher is doing nonsense, and then the school would investigate that teacher, and then that teacher would just be fired if they are mistreating the students. You know, like those sorts of problems are just non-issues. Those will be dealt with. But this sort of concept, this sort of viewpoint only comes from this idea of equality to begin with. That the people should just reach there's this utopian concept of the equality where everywhere should just receive some equal education, but like, no, it doesn't even necessary. That's not necessary. Like, even if you reach that, that's one thing, but like, it's not even necessary to begin with, I say. No equality, just forget the equality, just leave it behind. No equality. You have to start from the assumption that equality is not even necessary in the first place. Only from that point of view can you understand what I'm talking about. You get tunnel vision. You get tunnel vision when you are still under the impression that equality is all that matters. But it's not. Yeah, so you have to understand that. But even if you don't come out of this speech with agreeing with me, you still have to understand where I'm coming from. So you still need to be able to understand what I'm talking about. So that's also one thing. You don't necessarily have to agree with me, but at least you have to understand what I'm talking about. And then you might also come out of this understanding better what you stand for if you disagree with me, because you've heard an opposing viewpoint and so you can understand better. So what you need to do is you need to understand my position, so you need to be able to see equality is not the important thing at all. Students are not supposed to be graded at all. I mean, they can be, but like, that's not the point, that's not the ultimate end goal. That's not end goal, that's just a side issue. That's a side quest. Yeah, that's not important. Children can be evaluated or whatever, but that's not the important thing, that's not the goal. So the teacher should have more personal control over the students. They should be more personally involved, where the massive impersonal bureaucratic mess that is the school system is horrible. It's horrible on every level, because first of all, just the mere concept of the impersonal bureaucratic system is just like, it's disgusting. It's just inherently awful, where like, on like several social levels where like a human person wasn't designed, or whatever you want to call it, that they didn't evolve under the circumstances to deal with bureaucratic organizations to begin with. That's not the optimal way humans live. If humans evolved in some hunter-gatherer ages or whatever, if we are basically genetically more or less exactly the same as them, then we need to emulate those sorts of social circumstances more to be able to reach the sort of optimal performance, because if we treat humans as interchangeable cogs, well, they're just gonna feel miserable, and you can't forget the human factor. Lots of people forget the human factor, the concept of the personal experience. Dealing with the impersonal bureaucratic mess is just it is emotionally bothersome. It's just horrible, you know. You can't ignore the human factor, where humans were designed to have more personal social relationships. So that needs to be emulated, I believe. And also, it is not only that. There's lots of these other reasons, like I talk about, or I don't know if I've talked about that yet, but the teacher would also be more useful in... Oh yeah, I haven't talked about it, but I'm gonna talk about it next. So yeah, the social relationships, more personal relationships would be better, because that sort of thing is better because it's not a massive bureaucracy. Bureaucracy comes with all these big problems, and specifically because it's impersonal. Yeah. So yeah, now I'm gonna get to it. That I just mentioned. So yeah, now I'm gonna get to it. The teacher, when they have more personal control, or like they are personally involved with the students, they get to actually like see the students, their abilities, their skill. They understand what the students are doing, what they are up to. They understand the students' abilities and all that stuff. You see, yeah. Now I'm getting it. Yeah. So, so, like when you have this impersonal experience, like it creates this effect where like almost like there's no accountability, or like there is no like responsibility, or no accountability is better. There is no accountability to anything, because like it's impersonal. Like it's just a process. Like the teacher that you have, like they are just a faceless entity. They're just a tentacle of the system. Like the teacher doesn't matter. Like it creates this effect where like there is no accountability. And like I just mentioned, you can't ignore the human factor, where a student that doesn't believe that the teacher matters doesn't care if, for example, if they cheat in a test, because there is no personal relationship to hold anyone accountable to anything, because it's just an impersonal process. If you cheat at a test, then you don't feel any guilt for it, because it's just a process. It's just an impersonal bureaucratic organization. No one cares about anything, because it's just a process. It's just, it's just a, yeah, I don't know what's the word for it. There's not really any good word for it. It's the process. It's the impersonal bureaucratic thing that it is. And because of that, like this sort of experience, and I'm just using this as an example, but if you cheat at a test, no one cares about anything. Like if the teacher if the teacher catches you cheating, well, then you will be punished accordingly, because that's the rules of the system. But it's not personal. There's no personal investment. The student does not feel any personal remorse or anything, or like this teacher. But I believe that if the sort of system that I propose, where there is more of a personal involvement, I believe that would actually fix this problem. Where, and again, I'm just using this as an example, but it speaks to a larger experience in the school, where this is sort of an experience. So yeah, I propose that the personal relationship and larger involvement personally from the teacher would actually solve lots of these sorts of problems. For example, where if a student cheats, they will more so cheat on their teacher specifically. Like there is the personal relationship that would exist between the student and the teacher would be an actual relationship in the student's mind. It would be an actual relationship that exists. The teacher is some person that that the student is personally involved with, and to cheat on their test is an insult to that person. So like when there is a personal investment, it is then more like socially unacceptable, because you are not just cheating some bureaucratic organization, some faceless entity, and the teacher is just some tentacle of that faceless entity. You are not just cheating on some big organization like that. You are cheating on that person, that the teacher that you are personally involved with in that student-teacher relationship. Because that teacher is a person, and they are a person that has personal meaning to you as a student. Because there is a personal relationship, you are not cheating on a faceless organization that doesn't care about you. You are cheating on a test on a test of this teacher that is personally invested with you, so they actually care about you. So because my proposal removes this bureaucratic faceless organization, the specific involvement of the teacher, more personal involvement, it actually creates this personal relationship. So there is this idea I mentioned about the evolution of the humans and the optimal relationships and all that stuff. It manifests itself in all of these things like that. And again, it's just an example, but it doesn't have to be cheating. Like it just happens in general, where it's just about the studying, because you are actually studying, or like it's somewhat difficult to put the words. I perhaps lack the vocabulary or whatever to discuss this properly, but I hope the ideas get across. It creates this personal investment in the relationship. You are actually like personally accountable to studying as a student, because you are actually in a personal relationship with the teacher. So you have this actual accountability. There's someone to hold accountable to. Yes, there's always someone that everything can be held accountable to, because it's not just a bureaucratic organization that you just deal with. Like it's an actual personal relationship in your life. So I say that would have great benefits, and it would be really useful and have very positive effects in the world, because of the reasons, like because humans were designed to live under certain circumstances. But that specifically manifests, it's not just for comfortability. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. It's not just for comfortability, where like humans are more comfortable, they feel better in those circumstances. No. Like there are actual effects. It manifests in these effects where the accountability exists. There's always someone, because it's a personal relationship. There's always someone to like interact with, like that sort of thing. Yeah, so that sort of thing would exist. But the reason it would be specifically better for the students to learn, for the teacher to be personally involved with the teaching process more, and why I talk about forgetting all the standardized exams and everything like that, is because the teacher themselves should be the teacher. That's something important that you need to get from this speech. The teacher is the teacher. The teacher is not some organization. The teacher is not a specification. The teacher is not a standard. The teacher is not the school. The teacher is a person. The teacher is a person who is personally responsible for teaching those students. And it is the teacher's responsibility to teach. The teaching process itself is inherently personal. And I say that's how it should be. It is not a bureaucracy that you go to and that bureaucracy teaches you. No. It is a person. A teacher is a person that teaches you. You as a student are also a person. That is the important thing. With this, apart from all those social relationships and everything like that, there is also of course the benefit in that this is a higher, better form of teaching, but it also comes with that I talk about. These sorts of social relationships and the accountability and everything, it all goes together, it all makes a whole. These are all parts of a whole. All of these different things I discuss, they all combine into a single whole. A teacher that is personally involved with can personally teach to their best of their ability, where a teacher also might be better or worse at some things. And also, the teacher themselves should be free to teach in the way that they see the best way to teach. And it goes all the way. So when the students show up in the class, the teacher should be given complete freedom to do whatever, basically. In the context of teaching the students, of course. Because it is the teacher's job to teach. It's not the responsibility of anyone else but that teacher to teach. If the teacher fails to teach, well, then it's a bad teacher. Then the students are going to complain to the school that this teacher is useless. Then the school is going to evaluate the teacher, see if they are any good, and then they're going to fire any bad teachers. And that takes care of that problem. And if the school does really well and teaches the students really well, then that's really good. So that's the way things should be done, because the teacher, when they have the control, they can use their skill, their ability as a teacher to teach. And given all this stuff I discussed just now earlier, all the accountability and the personal relationships, they all come together to form this relationship where there is more of an incentive to actually learn. So what about then the students that don't care to learn? Well, they are not gonna care to learn either way. Regardless of the kind of school system that you have, if someone doesn't care to learn, they're just not gonna care to learn. So yeah, but I say that a more personal relationship is going to incentivize more people to learn. So if there are a couple students that just don't care, then they're just not gonna care either way. Regardless of the kind of system you implement, they are not gonna care either way. But at least with this system that I propose, more people would be more incentivized to learn. So overall, more people would be learning more and better, and everything would be overall better. And of course, the teacher's personal involvement also gives the teacher the ability to recognize this. They can profile each student in the best way they see fit. And also, why not individualize all the tests and everything? Why not make a separate test for each student to see how the students do things better, like they are better at some things and bad at other things, and like the point is to teach. It's not to evaluate them. The students are not to be graded and the grades to be the goal to get some high number. Like, that's not the point. The point is to learn. The teacher should have total and utter control in the way they see fit to teach the students, because that's the teacher's job. That's what the teacher exists for, to teach. The teacher should spend their time and effort in teaching the children, or not the students, that have to be children. They can be older also. Anyway, the teacher, but primarily they are children again, as I already mentioned near the beginning of this piece or whatever. Yeah, for the most part they are going to be children that go to school. Anyway, they are like the focus in some sense. Whatever. Students. I'll refer to them as students because that's better. So the students, they will, why not treat them differently? Like, why not give them different tests, different whatever? And if the teacher recognizes that some student is really good, then maybe that, if some teacher recognizes that some student is really good, why not just switch that student to a class of higher tier? And if some student is falling behind, switch that student to the lower tier. So now you can see how this personal control also combines with the earlier part of this speech where I talked about the segregation into different classes. You know, that's good stuff. Yeah, the personal involvement of the teacher, it is optimal in every way, because it's not just some textbook that the the teacher is teaching, because if a teacher is reading the students a textbook and giving them tasks to complete from a textbook, that's not the teacher teaching. That's the textbook doing the teaching. And that just fails the whole concept of the teacher. What is the teacher even doing there then? If the teacher just tells the students to complete these tasks from the textbook, who's the doing? What's the purpose of the teacher? What is the teacher actually doing there? Nothing really. Maybe the teacher could help the students if they have some issues or whatever. No, nonsense. That's not what that's not what the teacher is about. That's not what teaching is about. If the teacher wants to give the students textbook tasks to complete under my system, then that's the way that teacher teaches. But that should not be some sort of a uniform standard, universal that applies to everyone and every teacher has to do. No. That is so awful. That is not the teacher doing anything. The teacher should have the freedom to teach however they want. If that is by giving them textbook tasks, then that's the way they want to do it. And if it's by doing something else, then that's the way to do it. And the teacher should be the one to decide everything. They make the tests, they make the tasks, and they can do whatever they want. And there shouldn't be anything against anything. Like I said, they can give textbook things if they want to. If that's the way they see the best way to teach the students, then that's the way it's gonna be. If the teacher wants to make their own tasks, write them themselves, then that's good. That's the way it's gonna be done. The teacher could either write their own exams or take some standard exams. That's the way the teacher deems fit. The teacher gets to decide that. That's the ultimate point that I want to get across here, that the teacher is given the control for the teaching. Because that is the purpose of the teacher, and that should be how it's done. And the teacher gets to personally involve the students in however way they see fit. Where each student could be given different tasks. Why not? Again, I have to ask this. I emphasize this. Why not? As I talked about earlier, as I wanted you to understand, you need to drop equality as a value. People don't need to be treated equally. I say, screw that. Equality nonsense. No. People are not equal and they don't need to be. They don't need to be treated equally. Why should they be? It's all nonsense. The teacher can treat the students differently or the same way if the teacher wants to. If the teacher wants to treat the students equally, then so be it. If the teacher doesn't want to treat them equally, then that's the way it's gonna be done. The teacher decides everything. That should be the way it's done. Now, of course, again, I repeat this. If the teacher is doing something inappropriate, something nonsensical, well, then the students have the right to complain to the school that this teacher is up to no good. So, yeah. That's that. I say that's really good. The teacher having the complete control for the teaching is the only real right way to do things. Really, why not? That's the way it should be done. That's what the teacher exists for. Right, so that's enough of this topic. The teacher-personal relationship. I'm gonna get to next topics next. So let's see. Yeah. So what is the purpose of the grading and evaluation under the current system? What is the purpose? Why do people get evaluated, graded, whatever? Well, like the Chinese bureaucrats in the old historic times, they would have gone to school and then they would get positions of power in the government based on their scorings, basically. That's how a technocracy works. Technocracy is the rule of the experts, as they are called, might be called, where educated people, according to their skills in the academic fields, they get into positions of power and all that stuff. And like that sort of thing doesn't necessarily have to be only the government either. It could apply to other areas of life, where these sorts of academic things, they determine these sorts of things in life. That is kind of the purpose of the grading systems. But I don't subscribe to that sort of an idea as being the correct way to doing things. I would say that individual ability itself should be the determining factor, not a number on a test. You see, in fact, my system, this proposal that this speech is about, really grading doesn't even need to be a part of it at all. Like, it doesn't even have to be in there. Like, the way I would say it is that there is no required standard for any grading whatsoever. So students that come out of the school, they don't get any grading. It just doesn't exist. They are not given grades. But I leave it as an option for the schools themselves to decide to have the option to give the students grades according to their own standards. So each discrete school entity, each school, like they have separate schools, they can themselves decide whether to have grades and how to evaluate those grades. Because why not? If some company is hiring workers and then they look at some, and they are coming from some school, if it's a reputable school and there's some students coming with good grades, well, then they can hire based on those grades. The company can decide themselves what they want to do with that information. But in general, people who are just exist out there, workers, they're gonna have to prove themselves, whatever the work may be. Because inherently I think it's the only correct thing to do. So basically the idea there is that the school numbers are not really what matter, because why should they be? If a person goes to work at a company, the company needs to evaluate that person themselves. The only purpose that the school serves to society is to educate the people, to improve them. Grading is not a part of it. And so this leads me to do this serves as an introduction to two other concepts that we also now discuss. First, I mentioned the fact that the schools are discrete, different schools, and they can implement their own rules and whatever, evaluation things and all kinds of things like that. Well, let's explain what that means. And I'm gonna be talking about another thing about this system where the way you can think about it is basically that every school is a private school, but they are all public, in that they are all free to go to in terms of cost and whatever. And you can go to any school, so basically like there's not gonna be any price or anything like that to the school. The government would still pay for the schools, give money to the schools like it would under a regular public school system we have. But like they are all private schools. In the school system, there wouldn't necessarily be any sort of unified government-controlled school system necessarily, or rather, the specific implementation could be thought of in many ways. It could be potentially implemented in many ways. But one way I think is good is where like it is all government-controlled in a way to an extent, but they are all discrete entities. Like each school themselves is like a discrete entity, so they are not private, but like they are different schools. Like they are not a part of some same like thing. Like each school is like its own organization, and everything that happens within it. They all come together under the government basically. They all have to like do whatever the government needs them to do or whatever in that sense. So they are not private in the sense that like they get to charge the students money and then they could like make profit. It's not for profit. No profit nonsense. Profit is not important. The purpose of the school is to educate the people. The profit is well-educated people. So there's no need for monetary profit. That's not the purpose of schools, to make profit. That's not the point. So if the school is a monetary sinkhole, then so be it. The output of the school is well-educated people, so it is worth the monetary investment. So government will be putting money to the schools, but the way the school system works is that each school is its own thing, and they can all implement their own systems and rules, and like I mentioned with the grading stuff, they can all decide those things themselves. So I'm not exactly sure how that would be like specifically implemented in the sense that like would it really be considered private or is it really like public but there are just different schools under a public school system, or like how specifically like that would be done. Well, I do have a general idea and I would implement it in a way, so perhaps it could be changed or adapted over time if some problems are seen or whatever. It's not like these things need to be set in stone. This kind of a proposal that I'm proposing, it could be this sort of a specific implementation could be done in a couple of ways. But yeah, that could be sort of changed over time perhaps, but like one way would be to like have like private, they could be just private enterprises basically, schools, and then like they just get money from government basically, the government invests in that private enterprise, and then there could be some means of trying to determine which schools should get how much money. So perhaps like there could be some way to determine that, or they could just be outright owned by the government, so they are government institutions, but each school is its own discrete entity within the government, and then like all kinds of different ways like that could be implemented. But the important thing to realize here is that like the schools should be different schools, and they could have their own practices and ways of doing things to some extent, where like why should they be equal other than in that they have to accept all students equally, where like there is this important thing because like they have to be public in the sense that, so there are a couple requirements like this, yes, that even if they were private enterprises, they still have to adhere. They still have to adhere to this standard that I require of them. That regardless of how it's implemented, whether they are private or government owned or whatever, regardless of how that's done, they have to all be public in the sense that anyone can go to any school. They have to accept all the students. So they can't charge money, and then they can't have any entrance exams or whatever, unless it would otherwise be acceptable. Like there are entrance exams even under the current system we have. So under contexts like that, they could have entrance exams like that. But like there could be like, well, for example, under the system we have here in Finland where I live, we have the elementary school, the middle school, and then there are high schools and universities. Also there is this weird preschool thing that is also mandatory these days. It didn't used to be mandatory, it used to be optional, but it is also mandatory. It's this 1 year thing before elementary school. It's a really weird thing. So of course high school would hold entrance exams or whatever like that, so those sorts of things would still be allowed to carry over to the system I propose perhaps, unless I want to get rid of them, of course. I decide what I support after all, but yeah, I guess that sort of thing wouldn't be too bad necessarily. In that sort of a context, they could be allowed to hold entrance exams, but if there is an elementary school that is like something that's supposed to be free to join or whatever, free to go to for anyone, and all that stuff, and then it should be free for everyone to go to. There shouldn't be any extra requirements or anything like that. And also there could of course be laws and all kinds of things like that that deal with how the schools are allowed to behave, all kinds of practices that are allowed or not allowed or whatever. There could be some talk about school uniforms or whatever, for example. I don't know about that. I'm not exactly sure what my thoughts are on that. I would generally be in like favor of like freedom or whatever, so I might be against school uniforms, but like I don't necessarily conceptually disagree with them in some sense, where I don't know, I have mixed feelings about school uniforms. I've never experienced that myself because we don't have school uniforms in this country of mine, but like conceptually, like I don't know, who knows, maybe those sorts of things wouldn't be too bad. Like I don't know, I guess that people could democratically vote on that issue themselves. I'm not gonna have any opinion on that then, so I'm not gonna comment on that because I don't really any more than I'm just mentioning it, but I'm not gonna comment on whether I would be in support or against that, because I don't really know about that as of now. But anyway, if something like that was to be a thing, then like each school could themselves decide whether to have school uniforms or not. If it's permitted by law at all to have school uniforms, that is. The people might democratically vote to not allow school uniforms anywhere in any country, in any school. And then no school would be allowed to have school uniforms. But if it is allowed, then each school can decide themselves whether to have them. That's just an example. But the law could apply to any arbitrary thing like that. And there could be some specifications and some standards that the schools have to adhere to. And of course, in the case that if they were private enterprises, then there would necessarily be some requirements, because the government can't just hand out money to any private enterprise, regardless of how they behave. There would need to be some standards and whatever. So I'm not necessarily in favor of private enterprises. I would probably more so be in favor of a government-owned institution, but they would be somewhat discreet. I don't really know, it's a bit complicated. I'm not exactly sure how it would be implemented. There are several ways to implement it, and also it is possible to have an ecosystem where both a government-owned school institution exists concurrently with privately owned school enterprise systems. So those sorts of things are all possible. There are lots of ways to do it. Multiple different configurations are possible. There are many ways to do this, more than one. So yeah, that's a bit difficult. My expertise starts to show its limitations there, perhaps. I mean, I would just pick one if I was to implement a system, but like, I guess what I'm talking about primarily just focuses on like a public school system that is just owned by government, so that's the one that I'm gonna go with. So yeah, I'm not gonna implement necessarily. I wouldn't go with private enterprises. So yeah, but I'm just mentioning it because like, it's not necessarily incompatible with what I'm proposing. So like, whoever you may be listening to this speech, if there was someone listening to this speech and they were to implement some system, like, it's not necessarily incompatible, like, so that's why I'm mentioning it. Like, what I'm proposing should be compatible with any kind of system like that. So in that sense, perhaps I don't need to pick one for this speech, because I'm just proposing these different practices and ways of doing things within the schools, and how the school system, and what is the school system's role in society. So I'm just proposing these things. However you decide to implement those things, like, that's up to you. As long as what you're about to do is compatible with what I'm suggesting, then that may be a valid implementation of my ideas. So yeah, perhaps I don't need to pick one for this speech. But if I was to pick one, then I would pick a public school owned by the government that would have some sort of divisions, and each of these divisions had their own ways of doing things, perhaps. That's the one that I would perhaps go for as of now. But private enterprises wouldn't be incompatible. That's also an option. So I would also consider that, and I might change my mind later. Yeah, I'm open to possibilities there. How to specifically implement that. There are lots of ways to do that. Many ways. So, yeah. So yeah, somewhat private-ish, discrete school entities that are still all public and somehow tied to the government. So yeah, that's kind of a strange circumstance. But why not? It might combine well with National Socialism or something, perhaps. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, let's move on. Let's see. So another thing. So yeah, I was mentioning about the companies hiring people and whatever like that. If there is no grading and all kinds of things like that coming from, if a student leaves a school and is no longer a student, they don't need to get any grades, because, well, why should they? Really, what's the function of it, other than what I just mentioned about the technocracies and bureaucracy-controlled societies where some massive bureaucracy rules the society? Like, I'm not in favor of any of those. I don't like technocracies, and I don't like bureaucracies, and I don't like all that stuff. So, yeah, like, that sort of thing is nonsense. So, I don't think schools should be used as an instrument to train the elite in like, there's a way, in this bureaucratic way, specifically, this bureaucratic elite, where there's this technocracy that is trained in the school. Like, that's not the kind of thing that I like. And also, it's not like that's even useful when graduating from middle school. Middle school people don't become technocrats. One has to go to more higher levels of education. So what purpose does middle school evaluations have? No purpose whatsoever, other than to perhaps be used to entry a high school or something. So like that kind of thing, it might be like a stepping stone thing or whatever. I don't know, whatever we know, like that's kind of a complicated issue also, that one about entrance exams to high schools or whatever. Like, I don't even know if that should be a thing anyway either. I can't really comment on that now either, because I haven't even gone to high school, so I don't even know. But let's see. So, I don't know, should high school be like just free to go to for anyone? Or should there be some sort of an... Yes, there should be. I think I just reached a conclusion. Yes, I think I just found an answer. Yes. School levels, they should be allowed to hold exams to get into the school. Yes, they should be. So now I have reached a conclusion for that. There are the first levels of schools that absolutely should not necessarily have to do that. Or actually, no, I might even disagree with that one, because, well, actually, yeah, no. I think I just realized something as of just recording this speech right now, this instant, just a moment ago, I realized something, Perhaps even elementary schools and middle schools and all levels of education should be allowed to hold exams to let the students in. Because why not? After all, I'm talking about embracing excellence and people not being equal. Well, what is more not being equal and embracing excellence than this elitist way of doing things, where only some people are allowed into the school to begin with, but not because they have been granted a title by birth, but because their personal abilities excel at something over other people. Well, that is exactly what I'm in favor of, so yes, I did just reach a conclusion here. Yes, indeed, schools should be allowed to hold exams, entrance exams. But then, this also leads me to another thing that I was just about to get to. Again, it leads me to that thing. So yeah, people should be allowed to fail. So let failures fail. And like, this sort of a requirement to go to school, and this requirement to be good enough at something. That sort of thing should not exist. There shouldn't be a requirement for anyone to accomplish anything. When I talk about embracing excellence, that means that the people who naturally excel at something, they should be helped primarily, like the most, in that sense that, like, of course, everyone who goes to the school deserves education, and the teacher exists for that purpose, to educate the children. But like, who comes out of the school, the ones who are the best should be still the best. Where in the sense that also translates to the fact that, well, someone who is just utterly stupid, someone who is totally incompetent and useless and just bad at everything, just a stupid person, well, they're naturally just not good at anything. So there is no requirement, there shouldn't be any requirement that this stupid person should be lifted up to some standard. Let failures fail, basically. I already talked about this, that some of these subjects could be dropped for the students, that if they are not good at some things, some of those could be dropped and they could be focusing on the ones that they are good at in the earlier part of this speech, in the first part. So yeah, but I say even more so, not more so, along with that, perhaps like people who are just bad at everything, they might just fail entirely. And like, you could come out of the school as a total failure. Because like, in a school system that we have now, like, you have to redo years if you don't pass all the things, but like, if you don't pass the things, then you just don't pass the things. There could be an option to redo the year if you want to. The student, if they look at their exam results and see that they are really bad at something, and if they want to redo the year, then they can. Like, that sort of thing should be totally possible. So, But I say that failures should be allowed to fail. Let failures fail because, well, that's just the way the world works, where why should the failures not be allowed to fail? If they want to redo the year, if they want to go to more schooling, then they can get more schooling, whatever. But it shouldn't be a requirement. Failures should be allowed to fail. And if people just want to do something else in life that is not that academically focused, that doesn't really need any academic knowledge in general, then let them fail the school. And also, this leads me to yet another thing. School should not be a prison or a concentration camp, perhaps is a better term for it. Schools as they exist, they greatly resemble concentration camps to me. For whatever reason, I get this sort of feel in the back of my head that like, it's a fucking concentration camp. That's what it is. Schools are a fucking concentration camp because like the people are forced to go to a place, they are forced to receive some random indoctrination or whatever, at times, whatever, but depending on your views or value systems or whatever, the mere concept that the people are forced to go to a place to learn something might already grind your gears. Lots of people have lots of different kinds of worldviews and value systems. And to some extent I would like agree with that, but like here's the thing but here's my take on this. School should at least somewhat be optional. I think, well, like, it's a difficult concept to think about in the sense that like there are various compromises, but like that can be done, like society itself is a compromise with. It's a system to deal with other people and all that stuff. But like I think there should be more freedom that the students have. It should not be a prison or a concentration camp. It should not be any of that sort of stuff. If a student doesn't want to go to school one day, then they just might not go to school one day. Why not? Because like, why not really? Why should the students be forced to go to school? The way I see it, that like, it should perhaps be in a more so the students should have an incentive to go to the school, in that like the society should have these, the popular consensus in a society should be that students want to go to school, that they have an incentive to go to school. That, for example, like it should mean something that if a student misses a bunch of classes and then they get, what's the term for it when the student gets fired from the school? There's a word for it, but I don't know what that is now. I would recognize it when I hear it, but I can't recall it for whatever reason. I don't know. That word does not come to my mind. But anyway, the term for when a student is expelled, yes, that's the word. Expelled is the word for it. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. It should mean something that when a student misses a bunch of classes, that they get expelled. Like expelled should be this big word that the students fear. But in a world where people are like forced to go to school and like the school doesn't work and the school doesn't do anything useful and it's just a waste of time and everyone hates it, being expelled is something that a student wishes for. Because they don't like school, they don't want to go to school, they hate school. So a society where everyone hates school and they wish to get expelled, that demonstrates that there is something deeply wrong with the school system. And many of those sorts of root causes might just be what I discuss in this speech, and I believe they are. Students should not feel like they hate the school. Because like really, how unfortunate is that? Like, I've gone through all the school systems, or like the levels that are required anyway in the country of mine, all the stuff, so like not that much, but like what that were required, so I went with the bare minimum basically. Anyway, so yeah, it's still like a decade of schooling that I've gone through, and out of that decade of school that I've gone through, like, I hated it. I hate the school. It was a waste of time. Like, my personal experience, it was an abysmal, miserable. It is such a failure. But as I reflect on it now later, all I just have to say is that, like, I just wish it was something else. Like, I don't get the impression that like the school system is like actually like doing anything useful to society. Where, like, I live in Finland of all places, and like Finnish schools are for whatever reason like called the best schools ever, or whatever, like at least at some points in time, or like among the best, or depending on who you ask or whatever, and what the time period specifically may be. I don't know, maybe in recent times some Asian schools might have surpassed Finland or whatever, who cares? Anyway, the point is that like around the world, Finnish school is somehow seen for some reason as like among the top best in the world or whatever. Okay, but like, if this is like the best sort of thing ever, then all I can say about that is that I just feel bad about everyone else. Because what we have is still an abysmal failure. What we have is a miserable nonsense concentration camp that everyone goes to and everyone hates it. That's not a useful thing. Everyone fucking hates it. Well, I mean, not everyone. Obviously, there's always someone who likes it. But like, the point is that like, it's a miserable thing. No one likes going to school. It's somewhat hyperbolic to say that, but like, genuinely, it is not a pleasant experience in general. And like, well, I hated it for one, and I know lots of more did too. So yeah, it just feels bad about those poor kids who have to go to school in USA. Ay. Anyway, but like, yeah, school should not be a prison. I don't think it. I think it totally misses the point that a school is prison. A school should do everything they can to make the students to want to go there. And I think the most primary way to do that would be to actually be of some use. School in Finland, where I live, is utterly useless. Like, you go there and you sit there and you waste time. That's what you do there. You go there to waste time. It's useless. And like, the principles I talk about in this speech, they would definitely fix the situation. But like, the school is just bad in like, even with the current school system that we have, even with its concept, it's already failing at that. Where like, it's just useless. Like, it's not doing anything. Like, you can go there and you can just look at the, like, you can just, as a mindless drone, just stare like forward, just sit there and just stare straight forward, like with your eyes. You can just keep your head like still. You can just sit still and like, just sit there and like do nothing, like that's as good as it, like that's as useful as it is. Like, you might not literally be able to do that, because the teacher might look at you and tell you to keep going with your task, keep completing your tasks and whatever. But if you make the illusion that you are doing tasks, so instead of sitting there straight looking at the void, instead of doing that, you look at the work and you pretend to do work. Then that's effectively the same thing. It just looks different from the outside. You can do that, and you can get past the entire system. I got through the school system, and everyone else can do so. But I'm just talking about personal experience because that's my experience. I can only talk about other people's experiences as far as I'm familiar with those people and whatever larger trends I see in society. Anyway, one can get through the system without studying at all. And I don't even need to use myself as an example, because I know many other people did it too. Where like, I was in middle school. You know how many things I studied for tests? Do you know how many tests I studied for? Like, the sort of tests that you take and actually like studied for at all, like in any way. Just studied. I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 3. 3 tests. And they were not some major final exam things. Like, no. In the entire course of the 3 years of middle school, I studied for like 3 tests. And 2 of them were Swedish. Because I don't speak Swedish. I don't fucking speak Swedish. You fucking clowns. Why do you waste my time trying to educate me to speak Swedish? I don't give a shit. I don't speak Swedish. And I have no reason to. I don't give a fucking shit about the Swedish language. Like, it's not that I'm particularly against the Swedish language. Like, I'm not against it like I'm not against any other language. I don't give a shit. I don't want to fucking waste my time with the Swedish language. Like, yeah, just it's not like I'm against Swedish. I have nothing against the Swedish people. They are good people, and like their language has no issue. I'm not against the language. The language is not a problem. I just don't give a fucking shit about learning it. So yeah, why are you wasting my time teaching me Swedish? Why? Anyway, so I studied for 2 Swedish exams because otherwise I would have failed them. I would have just failed them because I don't speak Finnish. I don't fucking speak Swedish. So I would have failed the tests. I would have failed the tests because I don't speak Swedish. So I had to study for those. A little. Just a bare minimum to get past, of course. But just a little. Ever so slightly, just to get past the tests. To get a passing grade. And yeah, so, like, yeah. 3 heckin' tests I studied for at all. And for those I did the bare minimum in middle school. Yeah, that's a waste of time, I say. And that's like the normal way of doing things. The only function that studying in the school does is that, like, you just get a higher grade. But like, who gives a fucking shit about the grades? The only thing you do with that is that the grade gets used for vocational school entrance things. They evaluate your grades, and high schools use the grades for evaluation to get to entry into the high school. But other than that, it doesn't have any meaning, and no one looks at those, as far as I'm aware, like as if anyone cares about them. And if they do, like, who gives a shit? Is some company really going to hire someone based on their goddamn middle school and middle school final exams? Like, as if that means anything. Anyway, let's get back on track. So, it's a waste of time. It's an utter useless waste of time, where, yeah, it's just pointless. So one just looks at this and like, if this is like among the best schools, like, I don't know if those things are mistaken. If everyone who thinks that the Finnish school is somehow like this really good, best school in the world, whatever, among the best, who cares? Who gives a fucking crap? Someone who might think that way, like, I don't know if they are just mistaken. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Maybe if they are not mistaken, and Finnish school really is among the top ones, that's really, that means that every other school is really bad. If the school in our country is if the school in our country is as awful as it is, then that just means that every other one is so bad that they are so abysmal. Yeah. So I think this should be then represented, this solution then, as people should have the freedom not to go to school, because like, well, there's just going to be people who don't necessarily want to go to school. So people who don't want to go to school don't have to go to school, because perhaps some areas of life that they want to, some things they want to do in life, the paths they want to pursue, they don't need education. So yeah, let them excel at those things. You see, there are areas of life where school is not required for excellence. So if someone wants to excel at an area that doesn't require education, then education will just get in the way, really. Like, I'm not necessarily against like a very bare minimum of like some education, like everyone should have the ability to read and write or whatever, like some basic things like that. Like a few years of education might be mandatory for everyone, like that sort of thing. Like I don't have anything against like that sort of thing. Like those sorts of very basic things like reading and writing and whatever, that sort of thing should be mandatory probably. Yeah, I would keep that as mandatory. So I would have mandatory school be like at least 3 years, but not more than, 5 is like tops. 5 tops. Yeah, not more than 5. Like 5 is the most. Like between 3 to 5 years, perhaps I would set mandatory school for everyone, because the basic things like reading and writing, they are. I would say those are useful. So at that point you're just hurting society if people can't read and write. That's just harmful then. You can't really use it as an excuse not to go to school, that you want to do something that doesn't require school. If you can't read and write, yeah, no. At least a few years. But it shouldn't even be as much that the years are what is required, but rather there is an exam taken in the school. If you can pass the exam, then you are fine. So yeah, actually, that's a better way to look at it. So yeah, forget the years. Forget the 3 to 5 years that I just mentioned. Forget that. There should be an exam given to every person. Every person in a country, they will be given an exam. If they pass that exam, then they can proceed in their life, move on to the next thing. And so like they have to go to school until they can complete that exam, basically. So like that's perhaps a better way to do it. So at any age, it could be done as early as you want. So from birth, everyone is given the exam as an option. Anyway, yeah. So as a person is born, they are given the option to complete the exam at any point they want to in their life, basically. And up to that point in their life, they have to go to school for as long as they can. Well, I guess there should be some expiration. You can't really have some 40-year-old person still going to elementary school. That's a bit ridiculous. So there should be some expiration point. But yeah, anyway, of course, some mentally retarded persons will be exceptions. They will have a medical reason to get an exception. Of course, that's only sensible to do. But anyway, there should be some system to deal with that sort of situation where, like, there shouldn't be an age limit for it, for one. So, however young or old, like, you are, like, there should be perhaps, like, again, there are many specific ways it could be implemented. But I say the principles that I propose are the ones that matter. Again, the specific way you want to implement it can be done in a couple of ways. In a few ways, maybe more than few. Anyway, so yeah, again, so person is given the option to do the thing. If they need to go to school for 3 years to complete the final exams of elementary school, then 3 years it is. If they need to take 5 years, then 5 years it is. If they need to go for elementary school for 6 years to complete the exam, then that is how long it's gonna take. So that sort of thing should be possible. So it's not as much that they are held back years, where like it's this year-based system. It should be just complete the exam-based system. So you go to school however long it takes to complete the exam, within reason, and mentally retarded persons get exceptions and all that stuff, of course. But after that elementary school exam is passed, which only has the basic things that elementary school should teach, like the reading and writing and whatever, what would be taught in like 3 to 5 years within reason in the current system. So that's where the 3 to 5 years would come from then. The amount of stuff and the things that are taught in school from 3 to 5 years, if you can complete that exam that covers that, then you pass elementary school. If you can do it in 1 year, then good on you. And then you can proceed to next things. Then you only have to go to school for 1 year. Indeed. In essence, I want there to be way more flexibility like this. The system should be based on the person's ability to actually do things. Their actual skill, their actual learnings, their actual knowledge. Not these weird nonsense bureaucratic procedures. Like, I don't like them at all. I don't see what the purpose of all these procedures is but to be bureaucracy just for bureaucracy's sake. Perhaps they just want to have all this equality nonsense or whatever, and the bureaucracies are just a means to an end, but like, what you want is to educate the people. So the primary focus of school should be inherently the education of the people. So if someone takes a single year to learn what would otherwise take someone 4 years to learn in elementary school, then so be it. That person has now learned. Let's move on, let's proceed. Why bother with all of these systems where you have to go to school for some time? Like, no. Yeah, so those sorts of things should be changed totally. So yeah, elementary school should not be year-based, it should be complete the exam-based. And the exam should cover what is taught reasonably within 4 to 5 years. So under the current system, what is taught in 4 to 5 years, that an exam that covers that is given to persons to complete at any point in their childhood. So yeah, that's that. And then after that, they can decide whatever they want to do. So any later schooling would be optional. And also, given all this stuff that I've now talked about in this speech, I think the schools would come out of this reform way more useful for the people. I think there would be an incentive to want to go to the school. Because if the school actually teaches something useful, then there would be more of a compelling reason to go there. And also, vocational schools are quite popular here in Finland, where I live. And things like that, they can still have like requirements that you have to go to some other school for a while, or like an entrance exam or whatever. So you don't necessarily have to go to school. If you have the skill, then some entrance exam could just let you in, even if you haven't gone to school. So basically, like the way people do things here in Finland is that you first have the 1 year preschool thing, whatever it's called in English, I don't know. Then you have 6 years of elementary school, then you have 3 years of middle school, and then you have the option to go to either high school or vocational school. And then after high school and vocational schools, you go to universities of some kind. So you go to some general university after high school, or you could go to some university of applied science or whatever it's called from vocational school. So that's like the pathway system, whatever. I think there might be something above that actually, maybe. I don't know how it actually works. Beyond that, there might be still something above that. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not familiar. As far as I'm aware, teachers might actually go to something, like university teachers might actually go to something that is above university to learn something. I don't know how that works actually. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, I'm not familiar with that actually anymore, but beyond that, but yeah, so anyway. So it wouldn't be necessary, like, yeah, a person could, for example, within this structure that I just described, a person could entirely skip middle school, for example, passing elementary school exam, and then taking an entrance exam for vocational school, and then getting entered in because the person was good enough to get in. That could be perfectly valid. A perfectly valid path to take, for example. There would be no need for middle school if the person already is capable enough. But if they need education, they actually need to learn something to pass the entrance exam into the vocational school, then they would need to go to the school specifically to learn those things, to actually learn something, because they need to learn that stuff to be able to pass the exam. So that's the actual thing about the school. That's the actual purpose to study, like all that stuff. But also the studying things shouldn't be useless. They should be specifically related to the vocational school, obviously. It shouldn't be something totally unnecessary and unrelated to that school. If the vocational school has some specific, I don't know, they might be called trade schools also somewhere. Like if there's some specific trade, some specific skill, some specific type of thing that is taught in the vocational school, of course the entrance exams should reflect that and have things that are related to that. Yeah. Again, there are lots of ways to implement these sorts of things. Should the vocational schools have the option to require that the person has gone to middle school or not? Yeah, who knows? But even middle school should perhaps be exam-based, where just like how the elementary school, where a person can go to the middle school for however long it takes to pass the exams. They can pass the exams quicker than others if they want to, and can, or take a bit longer than others. Yeah. And also, this would combine with I don't know necessarily how it would combine with the system of the tiers. But actually, no, each individual tier could also have its own, each individual tier could have its own exams that they hold to get some to get some grading if they want to have grading. But it's not even the grading that's necessary, it's the learning. So if you go to school specifically just to learn things, then you don't even need to get a grade. After you've learned those things, you can now use your learned skills to then pass some entrance exam. So yeah, that's how it should be. So yeah, forget the grades entirely. Grades just shouldn't exist. Like, maybe a school can have the option to have grades, but like they might as well be useless, so no one needs to care about the grades. companies don't need to recognize grades and higher levels of schools don't need to care about what grades you got. So actually, yeah, maybe I should just outright remove grading as an option. So yeah, I mentioned earlier that grading should be an option for schools. And perhaps some company could look at some reputable schools' way of grading students and then let students in based on that or whatever if they want to. But maybe that should just be illegal. Maybe grading shouldn't even exist at all. Because the purpose of a school is to just teach the students. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that actually. Yeah, I'm gonna outlaw grading entirely. It just shouldn't exist. There is no need for it. Because like I've just described in this speech, there's really no reason to keep it. Like what is the actual purpose of the grading system? No reason really. A person's skills and abilities and all those should be all that matter. So yeah, the explicit purpose of grading systems is not needed. They are not needed. There will still be the exam to pass the elementary school and also the middle school as I'm considering right now as I'm talking. So that will still be needed to pass, but you don't need to get a grade from it, you just need to pass it. If you can pass it, then you've passed elementary school and then you can move on. But you don't need to get a grade. Grades are useless. So then, now as I was just mentioning, the middle schools perhaps would be the same way. Yeah, each tier in the school has its own passing grade. If you've passed that grade, then you've passed that grade. Well, actually, no. Middle school doesn't need passing grades because it doesn't have to be passed. Like I said earlier, failures should be allowed to fail. So actually, no, middle school doesn't need a final exam. Did I just call it an entrance exam the whole time? Who knows? Well, what I meant was a final exam. Shit, whatever. So yeah, the exam I was talking about that needs to be passed for the elementary school, is the final exam, not the entrance exam, if I talked about it that way or no. Anyway, so yeah. Middle school should not have a final exam because it doesn't need one. You just go there to learn and then you get out of there when you've learned. The different tiers exist so that different skill levels of people can go there to learn at different speeds or whatever. Levels of advancedity. So, yeah. So a school system where you don't need to pass anything. You just go there explicitly to learn. And this learned ability, this actual knowledge that you've acquired, that is what is used to, that is what's used by the student to pass entrance exams to later schools. And then, of course, after schooling, later in life, to actually be a competent citizen. They have all the skills and all that stuff they've learned. Yeah. So, let's see. Do I still have something more to talk about? Maybe there is one thing I have not mentioned yet, but it might come from this, or perhaps it might already tie into the earlier things, but I will mention it just for the sake of mentioning it also now. There is a massive lack of discipline in school. And it's just, it sort of ties in with the personal relationships that I've talked about. I believe it was the second part of this speech, where I talked about the personal relationship with the teacher and the teacher having the personal control. It sort of ties in with that, but there is no discipline. Like I just mentioned just earlier, just a moment ago, I mentioned about how one can get past the school without learning anything. Without studying at all or anything, I mean. But there's no discipline. No one needs to put any effort into anything or anything. There's no... you can basically just sleepwalk through the entire school, not doing anything. And if that's what you want to do, then yeah, whatever, but why do you even bother going to school then? School should be something that people want to go to. There should be incentive to actually learn something. If you want to get a job, and some vocational school, some trade school, teaches you how to do that job, so it focuses on that area, they might have an entrance exam that requires you to have a competency in the areas that they want. They specify the areas that you need to be competent in to get to that vocational school. And for you to get that competency, you might either study on your own in your own personal life outside of any school system, or you might go to a school. And you should go there for the explicit purpose of learning something, not just to pass the school so that you can enter another school. It's not just a thing that you need to pass, it's actually a place where you learn. So yeah, if you already have all the skills, if you study in your own private life and you don't go to school, then you don't need to go to middle school, for example. You could entirely skip middle school and just learn on your own and use that learned knowledge to in an entrance exam to a vocational school. And then from the vocational school you could learn some trade school, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if those two are interchangeable. Maybe they are not, maybe they are, who knows. If it's a trade school, you could have an entrance exam for the trade school and you can learn all that in your private life outside of school, and then you can get out of the trade school with the ability to do all that stuff that they taught you. And also, that also another thing. Well, how should the trade schools and vocational schools, should they have exams or whatever? They could have certifications, you know. That's an interesting concept that lots of people don't necessarily talk about all that much, but certifications are one thing that is very interesting, where a trade school could actually they could have certifications, exams, or whatever they are called, if they're called exams. They could have exams for certification, actually. So they don't need to have grades or anything like that. You go to the school, you learn, you take the exam for the certification, and then you get certified for some trade or whatever. And then you can do that. Then you can go get some work, and you have been certified. You know, a certification would be way more useful for a workplace than some random useless grades. Especially from some random useless middle school or something. So yeah, anyway, like, school system entirely, like, it should exist to teach the people. So yeah, there's everything past elementary school should be optional. Everything should be optional. The only thing that should be necessary is elementary school, so that you can learn the basic things like reading and writing. And if you can complete it in 1 year, then you can do so. So this allows the freedom and the flexibility for the people to achieve the best they can. So someone who is really intelligent, some prodigy, they can go to elementary school really early, complete it in 1 year, move on to the next thing, complete it very quickly, and specifically, like I talked about with the tier systems, they can get the best education specifically focused for them, so they can go to the highest tiers at every level, elementary school and middle school, and then they can go to more schools and go to the higher tiers, and then they will come out of it really good. And that's like the ultimate best case scenario, where like one will be coming out of the school really young with lots of acquired skill. That is way better than wasting your time with a required mandatory amount of time. Like, you have to go to some specific amount of years in a school. You have to just sit there, and then they force you to waste time with useless things that you don't care about, and then like that you're not even good at, and like it's a waste, instead of focusing on the strengths like I talked about in the first part of this piece. So yeah, out of this system, a student will come out with all the acquired knowledge and skill that one might have, like that one could have, like as much as one can have, yeah. They will be very focused and very specially skilled in one area or more. It doesn't have to be just one, obviously. Like, nonsense. Like, they would be very skilled in the areas that they are skilled in. Now, of course, the absolute best case scenario would be someone who is really good at everything. They would never go to any low tier classes. they would never go to any, they would never need to drop any subjects. So under this system that I propose, the absolute best case scenario would be that person, that prodigy who goes to the elementary school really young, passes it in like 1 year, then goes to the middle school, takes all the most advanced tiers of every subject and gets through all of them, and then goes on with the rest of their education, maybe high school, and then does whatever people do in high school, and maybe even university or whatever. Maybe they could go to some vocational school, or maybe there's some University of Applied Science or whatever that person may have. Like, you could come out of the system really quickly, so you don't have to waste your entire youth in school just sitting there wasting time. You can get through it as fast as you can. This allows for that immense flexibility, and it allows for that great potential not to be wasted. Because one of the most unfortunate things in this world is when great potential is wasted. Because there are people who are talented and have lots of potential. It is so unfortunate to then waste it, to just throw it away. Because, you have to sit here and learn this awful useless subject that you are really bad at, and then just waste time with that. Like this prodigy person I might mentioned, for example, there might be a few things that they are not good at. So they would need to waste time with that stuff. And it doesn't need to be that they are good at everything. Like I mentioned the best case scenario that they are best at everything. I mean, yeah, but like it comes in many forms. Any kind of person who is really good at anything. You could be really good at a few things or all things or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point that I'm trying to get across is that it reduces all the waste and inefficiency. Because inefficiency in a system is the worst thing ever. And like, just failure to operate perhaps is the worst ever. But like, yeah, there is so much wasted potential that is wasted in a school system. And it doesn't need to be that one prodigy person. It applies to everyone. Because even just a generic person, they get the tailored experience where they take the tiers of the classes that they are good at the correct levels. So you could be good at some things and bad at others. Then if you're really bad at something and you don't care about it at all, that one subject could be dropped entirely. Because why not? Why should you waste time with something that you're really bad at and you don't care about? Why bother with it? Like, it's a waste. You're not gonna care about it in the end. You're never gonna use that thing. It's never useful. It's a waste of time. It's the waste of the time of the person who goes to the school, the student. It's a waste of the time of the teachers. It's a waste of their effort. Their time and energy that they have to spend teaching the students. It's a waste. There is so much waste. It's a wasteful system that is an inefficient system. Because the system, when it is designed to follow arbitrary procedures instead of actually recognizing people's competency and it's evil. I say it's evil because it's harm. It is material harm. You see, material waste is harm because you are wasting like things, but like it doesn't have to be material waste. It's waste of time and energy in the sense that it's a waste of person's effort. That's waste. That is harm. Because waste is harm. Because you are throwing things to waste. It is harm. It's not just lost potential, because it's also waste. Like, it's not only lost opportunity and lost potential things. Like, it's actively wasteful. Because when you have a student sit there and waste time, that is time they could be spending learning something that is actually useful, and that is time they could be doing anything useful in their life. But instead they have to sit there because some procedure tells them to. Some system is designed that they are required to. And that is just inherently evil. It's evil on varying levels. It's evil because it's wasteful. It's evil because you're wasting that person's time. A person born into this world has a short limited amount of time. And how dare you waste it? But again, I want to repeat this and I want to emphasize this. It's not just for the elites. It's not just for those who are the best and the most brightest and the prodigies and all that stuff. It's not just for them. Like, even a stupid person benefits from this system because inherently the tier list, no, not a tier list, but inherently the tier system, it allows for the optimal tailored experience for everyone. It benefits the stupid person also. It benefits everyone. Universally, everyone benefits from this system. And that's why it's so great. Where a stupid person who is bad at things, they go to the lowest tiers and then they receive appropriate education. They receive education that is more focused for people with their abilities. Because, well, I mean, that's the only correct thing to do. Why put the most brightest kid right next to the most stupid kid in the same school? Like, it's harmful for both of them. It's not. I'm not talking about this just from the point of view that the elites, whatever. It's not just about the elites. Like, I'm talking about the people. I have the best interest of the people in mind. So, I'm not coming from an elitist point of view. That is not my intention. What my intention is the best interest of the people. It just so happens that allowing excellence and allowing people to reach elite abilities and skills and performance and all that stuff and reach a status of some elite in society through personal experience and like personal achievement. It just so happens that that is in the best interest of the people. When people are allowed to reach excellence, when people are allowed to become elite, whatever the area of life may be again, it can be any area, anything, absolutely anything that is covered in life, one can be good at. So everyone gets the best experience, everyone gets the best of this system. Even your normal average person, that does not really exist, that is perfectly average, but it's just a general term for people who are more or less average. Even your generic person from the general population, generic person is perhaps a better term than an average person. Oh yeah, why do people say your average person? Why do people even say that? Yeah, I just said it because I hear everyone else say it, but why do people say that? Why don't they just say that a generic person? A generic person better describes what I'm talking about, not an average person. Average is relevant when talking about something that involves average, but generic, enough nonsense. So your generic person still benefits from the system because the generic person have some skills and less in other areas. Has more skills in some areas and less in others. So the tier system allows the students to get the best experience at everything. The personal experience with the teacher, the personal connection, allows for the more social situation, the better social situation where the accountability exists and the personal relationships and the intense incentives exist. And they all align in such a way as to promote the education. And also because of all of this, and the ability to drop useless subjects and focusing on all the good stuff, and not wasting time with bad things, focusing on the strengths. Because of all of these things that I've discussed in this proposal, because of all of these systems, all of these effects, the system inherently, the school, will be actually more useful, it will be more desirable, people will want to go there. People will want to go there to learn, because they need to learn things, because they need to know things, to do things in life. So that's the way it should be. So that's like the ultimate conclusion from this piece, I think, that a school should exist for the education of the people. Whatever is the best way to teach the people should be the best way to teach them. This covers all the areas of education, the school system, from the teacher's ability to teach whatever the teacher wants, because the teacher is the teacher, to just the school system being very flexible and allowing people the freedom to do whatever. Some might not want to go to any more school than elementary school. Some might want to go all the way to university. The tier systems allow everyone to get a better tailored experience. Like it's optimal in every way. I say this is one of the most important things to do in a society, because the school in a society serves one of the most important roles. It teaches the people Like, just think about it. The fundamental purpose of a school, it is to educate, to try to improve the lives of the people, the next generations of the people. So whatever you do to the next generations of the people, like that's like one of the primary, most important focuses of a society should be the school. Because that's one of the most important things, the education of the next generation of people. Because we live in a world, we live in an inherent reality where generations of people, like you have the same city, like you can have the same city, but the thing is that with that city, the population gets replaced. Each period of time, there are different people living in a city. Like, think about it, isn't that strange? The city remains, but each period of time, different people live there. And it's not like people just moved out and others came in. No, new people are born and old people die. So there exists in this reality this inherent process where the people reproduce like this and old people die. And you need to, and because of that, what school does is the school takes care of the new people. It educates the new people to work within the system, to promote and propagate the system. And therefore, that is one of the key most important things that a society must get right. Education is one of the most important things. Whatever form it takes, and also the concept of education itself is not limited to a school system. The concept of education itself can take any form. It could take a personal mentorship or just a community school thing. Like the concept of educator and educating the next generations of people, it can take any form, the concept itself. So because it's one of the most important things, it is one of the most important things, so it needs to be done right, and it needs to be discussed more. I don't hear people talking about education enough, and that is unfortunate. And hey, it's not like I'm against things like community school anyway. In fact, actually, I might just be in favor of things like mentors and just like personal, like outside of a school system, like community-driven efforts to educate their own children and all that stuff, because like the school system doesn't need to be all there is, the sort of government institution. Like it could exist along with everything else. Like I just talked about, I mentioned it already a few times, that a person doesn't need to go to school at all. Like you could skip middle school and go from elementary school to vocational school, for example. You could study in your own private life. I mentioned that. I said that. So, what form does that take then, specifically? How do you study in your own private life? What does that mean, actually, in practice? How do you do that? Well, that could take many forms. You could just go to some libraries and just study on your own, like just personally on your own. There could be some community school, or like maybe your parents might teach, like parents might function as teachers, and there could be some community things. Maybe you could go to your neighbor's place. Maybe the neighbor is a teacher and teaches their community members. Like those sorts of things can just as well exist alongside the sort of school system that I talked about for the most of this speech. The vast majority of this speech, almost entirely this entire speech until this point. That kind of school system could exist alongside this sort of community effort. And also that sort of thing could be promoted as well. Yeah. So, this allows for a society where there is more freedom, because I'm a big fan of freedom. Freedom is one of my core values, like, at the very core, like, there's only like 3 core values that I have. And freedom is one of them. So, yeah, freedom. Yeah, this allows for a society with more freedom. But it also, as I've just now described, at great length, the school system will be more useful. It will be more efficient and result in better educated people. Because a person who excels really well at some things that they are really good at, and is not that good at other things is better than a person who is just average at everything. In a fight, the person who is really good at some things beats the average person. The one person who is average at things. And by a fight, I mean a societal fight in like a society, a world. A fight is just a metaphor for those people. A competition, yes. In a competition, the person who is really good at something, the competition of life, yes, that's what it means, the fight. The person who is really good at some things, like excellent, really the best of the best at some things, and then is really bad at other things, they are always going to be better than the person who is average at everything. Well, not always, but like, well, perhaps we need all of them. We need all those people. But that's what it means. That's the diversity. Not everyone who comes out of the school will inherently be just good at something and bad at others. If there's a person who is just generic, if there's a generic person who is really just average, this time it is average. Actually, that's funny. Ironic. When I earlier talked about the generic versus average terms. This time it actually is average. So yeah, if there is your average person who actually is average this time, so yeah, your average person is actually useful this time. Ironic, isn't it? But anyway, yeah. Well, it's only somewhat ironic. I did mention it is sometimes useful. This is one of them. So, yeah, your average person, they will still be your average person. Everyone gets the best they get. It amplifies everyone's abilities. That's what it means. You don't focus on your bad traits and just improve those to lift up your poor traits, which can be done with skills to some extent, depending on the person and depending on things. Whatever. You don't just do that. You amplify your strengths. So the strengths reach new heights. And that, I believe, is a better society. It will produce a better world for everyone. Everyone will benefit from that system. So yeah, that is my proposal for reforming school systems and just the general culture around education, like I mentioned just now at the end of this speech about the community things. Just the concept of education needs to be reformed. There needs to be a massive cultural paradigm shift in the Western civilization. I don't know how to achieve that, but anyway, if it happens, this is the sort of direction that it should head into. Because I unlike many others, don't think that the Western civilization is doomed and it's just inherently like there's some big problem that's like going to fail. Like lots of people you see go on the internet, there are lots of big internet personalities who talk about how the Western civilization is going to fail, or it has reached its end, or whatever. Well, even if that is the case, well, a new age is going to start, so let's start the new age with this good stuff then, yeah. However that happens, it doesn't really matter, but I think lots of the fundamental core values of the Western civilization to some extent are immensely useful, and in a kind of, and like partially like I am coming from the same sort of general like my viewpoint on this issue actually isn't that far from it, where like I just take a different interpretation of equality, where some people have the concept of equality as I've discussed, where everyone is just equal, period. Where I think everyone just deserves equal rights, like right to go to school. The equal rights, equal law applies to everyone equally. Like I mentioned, equality is a very big concept. It can be implemented in many ways, in many areas, different areas of life. So yeah. So I'd still believe in the good equalities, the equal rights and all that stuff. So my view isn't inherently in contradiction with Western civilization. In fact, it might as well just be a product of it. Or compatible with it even, like, yeah. So, enough with that nonsense. I don't need to make an analysis. I don't need to make an analysis of the Western civilization in this speech. Yeah, I'm starting to lose a bit of coherency here at the end of this speech. I have already been talking for like, what is it? 2.5 hours. I have been talking for 2.5 hours. I'm starting to lose a bit of coherency here. So yeah, it's time to end this speech now. So yeah, that's my proposal for reforming school systems and the general culture around education in the Western civilization. And I'm specifically talking about Western civilization because I don't really know anything about any other civilizations. So yeah, that's that for this speech. Thanks for listening. Until next time, bye.